Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the next episode of my 1999 movie project, where I am trying to watch all the movies in Best Movie Year Ever by Brian Raftery. Of course, this week we are on Office Space, as you can tell by the Initech shirt and a bunch of other stuff here. Really like this movie. First time I saw it, didn't see it in 1999. I think the first time I saw it was probably on like network TV, like TNT or something like that, like a Saturday like afternoon movie or whatever it was. Ended up really liking it, and then in 2005, and this is where I watched this, they released the Office Space Special Edition with Flair DVD. Has the movie on there. There's some deleted scenes, some nice little extras as well. But really enjoyed this movie. Still really liked it. The technology, the only thing that doesn't hold up is the reason, the software they're working on in the movie is basically to make stuff Y2K proof. So that's the only kind of the aspect of the movie that I think kind of didn't hold up. And then of course, like the when it shows like a desktop like window or something like that, it's obviously like Windows 95 or 98 maybe. So I'm thinking 95 because I think they were filming this in like the like 97 maybe 98. So Windows 98 came out of course 1998. So they're probably using like Windows 95, maybe some older even older operating systems. But one thing I really like about this movie is I used to have this movie on. It was a Creative Zen Vision M media player, and I put the movie on there to watch. But I ended up finding myself just listening to the movie more often than actually watching it. So if I was at work, I would have one headphone in and have the movie playing, and I'd be listening to it. And somehow, this is when I worked at a grocery store, it made my job a little bit easier, made it feel like it wasn't quite as bad as the job that Peter and his friends have in Office Space. So it kind of like helped me get through a job that I didn't particularly like. Paid fairly well, but it was not a great place to work, I don't think. But anyway, that movie kind of just like I listened to it throughout the day, was just like, okay, at least my boss isn't as bad as Bill Lumbergh or any of the like his like sub bosses and all that, because Peter has 8 bosses in the movie. Again, really fun movie. We're just gonna start here. I got some basic notes here. Again, using the 2005 DVD. I think I picked this up. Yeah, I picked that up in 2005, and over the next few years, collected quite a small collection of Office Space stuff. Some of it I have here, some of it I don't. I have like a Bill Lumbergh bobblehead somewhere in a box. I have the an Initech coffee mug somewhere, as well as an Initech like little plastic I think it's like a glass award. You put it on a stand and it rotates and it lights up, and it says "No Talent, Ass Clown" on it, which is a quote from Michael Bolton in the film. But also have stuff like the red Swingline stapler. I think a little bit of trivia for the movie is Swingline didn't actually make a red stapler until after this movie came out. From what I remember reading, they needed a stapler that wasn't just that popped off the screen as far as color wise. So they took it, painted it red, and then a lot of people would call Swingline and say like, "Hey, do you guys make these red staplers that were in this movie?" And of course they didn't. So then eventually they ended up actually making these red staplers. I've had this stapler I think since like 2008, and it's actually a pretty solid stapler. But aside from that, again, seeing movie opens up with Peter's commute to work, and the funny thing about this is I was recently read a book last year by Aubrey Marcus. It's kind of like a self-help book, and the traffic jam scene is mentioned in that book. So it's about talking about using your commute time to like instead of getting angry, like listening to a podcast or something like that. Anyway, so a traffic jam scene unfolds. Peter switches between different lanes, and as soon as he gets into a new lane, the lane that he was previously stuck in starts moving. And this is during the opening credits, and it kind of sets the tone for Peter's like work life, pretty much, or just life in general. Again, the probably the iconic scene with Bill Lumbergh shows up. He basically gives Peter the business about the TPS reports, asking if he has a copy of the memo and all this other stuff. And then another one of Peter's bosses shows up asking about the memo. I did have an office job, I think in the summer of 1998. It was only for a few months. And there was definitely like things with like memos and things like that. So I kind of could relate to that a little bit. Speaking of Bill Lumbergh, also, I did back in 2008, did a Bill Lumbergh costume. Unfortunately, I don't have any pictures of this, but it was basically just suspenders, shirt, tie, took some aviator glasses and popped the frames out or the lenses out. Had a really kind of hokey ring like Gary Cole wears in the movie, which I think is actually a ring from a TV show that he was on prior to that got canceled. Wore some slacks, carried the stapler around in my pocket, gave out TPS reports because I was working at a bar at the time, and was just there kind of like handing out these TPS reports. People actually mistook me as Milton a couple times, but that's all good. Um, anyway, so Lumberg, that scene is iconic. We get. I like that the camera angles used whenever a boss generally is talking to Peter. It's kind of a very Citizen Kane style camera angle where it's the person talking to him is filmed from like lower than the body, so it's like pointed. The camera's pointed up at them. When they're talking to Peter, the camera's pointed down, so it gives you that kind of power dynamic. I think the first time I saw that in or noticed it was Citizen Kane when we watched that in a film class in high school. There's a whole case of Monday's evil printer kind of thing shows up. Jennifer Aniston pops up into the movie as well. I think this is one of the first movies that I actually saw with her in it, and I think it's one of the movies that I remember seeing where she isn't playing the character from Friends. So a lot of her roles I think are very very similar to Rachel from Friends. This one felt a little bit different, and I remember reading in the book by Brian Raftery that I don't think the studio was super confident with this movie, but they were some of their kind of worries were eased a little bit when she was announced to be in the movie because it's like, okay, she's a popular actress, she's on Friends, which is still a really popular show right now. I think there was still, at that point, there was like a few seasons to go because it ended in 2004. This is 99. Like maybe four, maybe five seasons left in the show. What's this? Yeah, there's Anne, which is Peter's girlfriend. They go to of course, the occupational hypnotherapist, where the therapist actually dies, like has a heart attack, and then Peter is just kind of in this perpetual state of not really caring. He still goes to work, but he's definitely not putting in the effort that he used to. And the funny thing comes that he gets interviewed by the Bobs, which are one of the more funny scenes in the films, where he's kind of explaining that he has 8 different bosses. He hears about problems from each one of them, and then in any week he's maybe doing about 15 minutes of actual work. And the funny thing is, the people that are actually doing their jobs end up getting fired. Like his friend Michael and Samir are getting let go, and he's actually being promoted. What else we got here? There's a whole thing with the pet rock with the jump to conclusions mat. There's a thing I have. It's called the Office Space kit, and it actually includes the jump to conclusions mat. It's got like a little miniature stapler. That's where the coffee cup came from as well. But there's also the $1 million question, where it's like, what would you do for $1 million? Which Michael Bolton says is a flawed question because janitors wouldn't exist because nobody wants to clean up stuff if they would had $1 million. He asks his friend Lawrence about that. Lawrence is his Peter's next door neighbor, and basically says, like stuff like when your boss wants you to work late, generally they're going to ask you at the end of the day. This is kind of going out of order a little bit because he goes to the therapist after this scene. But I've had that happen where it's after we're closing at like a place and somebody's like, hey, we need help tomorrow, can somebody come in? I've literally had that happen where I'm about to punch out and they're like, hey, we need help tomorrow, and I'm like, all right, I'll come in. That kind of thing. Lawrence basically also says you don't need $1 million to do nothing, that his cousin's broke and doesn't do anything. Peter then, of course, gets asked after. I imagine takes place on a Friday, right before going to the therapist, the occupational therapist, to come in and work on Saturday and Sunday. He of course goes to the therapist and then starts not caring and doesn't go to work that day at all, or on Sunday either. But the interesting thing about this scene, when he's trying to dodge Lumberg, he is frantically trying to close down his computer, and it's being really slow. It's like backing up files, saving changes to like an index and stuff like that. And it kind of reminded me of like this scene reminded me of like a spy movie where you have a computer that is like downloading some top secret documents, and it's like you see the progress bar going from left to right to 0 to 100%. And then you have quick cuts of Peter's face as he is kind of getting frustrated with the fact that the computer is taking a while to actually do its job, and then you cut between him and Lumberg walking around, and then of course Lumberg catches up to him and asks him to work. During the occupational hypnotherapist thing, he basically says each day that he works is the worst day of his life, so each day is getting worse and worse and worse. There's a line, I think, there's something about Mary. This is a completely unrelated film, but It's a clever way of saying that each day is worse than the previous day. It's Chris Elliott says it to Ben Stiller, and it's something like each day is worse than the each day is better than the next or something like that. So like this day is maybe all right. The day after is bad. The day after that is worse. The day after that is worse than that. So it's a really clever way of doing that. Peter kind of says that here, but it's also mentioned in something about Mary in a little bit different kind of like wording, where it's like you kind of have to hear it a couple times to actually know what he's talking about. I like Anne's kind of expression as like Peter is basically there saying, "Hey, can you just make it so this is not the therapist again? Make it so when I'm at work, I'm not actually thinking that I'm working." Basically, he gets kind of like reborn in a way after that thing with the hypnotherapist. I liked the little nice little touch was when he gets like has like a ton of this voicemails from Lumberg, a couple from his girlfriend, and then he hangs up on his girlfriend, and then she leaves another message, and it says, like I'm breaking up with you, we're through, and then the actual like her voice actually kind of just shakes the answering machine a little bit, which was kind of interesting. Um, like one of my favorite lines, which I kind of like, is what would you say you do here? Is when the Bobs are interviewing Tom. Is Tom is kind of they're kind of like, well, your position is kind of pointless because these customers can just go right to the software people and give them what they want without having you or your secretary do it for them. Um, Milton gets to talk to them as well. Oh no, not Milton. Michael Bolton kind of is like, yeah, I love Michael Bolton, all that kind of stuff. The Y2K switch gets mentioned, which is the only thing I mentioned. This kind of dates this movie a little bit, aside from like also just like the parent like CRT monitors, all that kind of stuff. Basically says he has 8 bosses, does about 15 minutes of work. We get into the whole thing with Flair at the Chachi's restaurant where Jennifer Aniston is wearing, I think it's like 15 or 16, and Brian is wearing like 32 pieces or something like that. So Mike, that character actually played by Mike Judge doesn't actually say that the bare minimum isn't enough, but it was kind of like implied that you should wear more than the bare minimum. Let's see, and then one of the better scenes in the film, one of my favorites, is when it's like a montage with "Damn It Feels Good to Be a Gangster," where Peter is just kind of like deconstructing his office, knocks down a wall, does a bunch of like other stuff. It's like a montage of him kind of not caring and also going to work at the same time. We get the Tetris scene where he's playing Tetris at his desk. Um, the reason I remember the scene sticks out is because it was used by Blizzard for a World of Warcraft commercial where instead of Tetris, they kind of superimposed World of Warcraft there and then photoshopped or inserted like the World of Warcraft like box and discs on his desk. So he's playing Tetris there, and again, Michael and Samira end up like are the ones getting fired. Peter's getting promoted. They do the whole Superman 3 virus thing. So you see, basically they go into the whole thing of Tom trying to like kill himself with carbon monoxide poisoning, and then gets into a car accident. The iconic printer scene, which is kind of funny. Whenever a lot of people mention the printer scene, they mention "Damn It Feels Good to Be a Gangster" with that scene, when that scene is actually a completely different song. I think this movie got like before a lot of people saw it. I think maybe even before I saw it, I was seeing gifs of the printer scene, or specifically the scene where Michael Bolton is actually punching downward onto the printer. But that's just a classic scene. Whenever I want to break a piece of like equipment that doesn't work, I'm going to say I'm going to go Office Space that thing. I don't think I've ever actually done it, but it would be cool just to take an old printer and smash it. Basically, Joanna, at one point, that's Jennifer Aniston's character, had dated Lumberg. Peter thinking this is Bill Lumberg, but it's another Lumberg from a completely different company, which is Inatrode. What's this? Jenny's or her job is also not great because she's constantly getting grief from forget about the character. I think it was Stan is the character played by Mike Judge. It might be something else, but getting grief from her for not running a flare. Eventually quits, flips a bunch of people out in the restaurant off, and gets fired. They go to the cake scene. I indicated here this little sad face that Milton for the second year in a row gets no cake. So like the person next to him gets a piece, and then that lady should have passed it to him because he would be next in line for cake, but doesn't get any. Steve comes by. They're like talking about like the virus thing went wrong. Michael Bolton put a decimal place in the wrong spot. It ended up being like $314,000. I think it was supposed to be like $31.14, or it was something small like that, where it takes a fraction of a penny a day. There's a scene where Peter is explaining to Joanna about it, where it's like you taking pennies from like a jar or tray at like a 7-Eleven, but you're taking like fractions of those pennies. So it adds up over time, but basically you're taking such a small amount that it won't get noticed. But of course, Michael Bolton messes the virus up, and it takes a lot more money than it was supposed to. They basically talked to Steve about that. Steve actually worked at Initro and it was basically kind of bribes them. It was like, hey, or blackmails them, not bribes them, blackmails them into buying a bunch of magazine subscriptions. Because even Peter's like, what am I going to do with 30 subscriptions to Vibe magazine? Um, Eventually, so Peter decides to kind of take the fall for it, puts the money, gives the money back to Initech, slides it under the door. Has second thoughts, tries to get the money back, but can't. Um, Milton, of course, is constantly getting abused by Lumbergh throughout this movie. He has had to move his desk multiple times. He basically gets like conscripted to be an exterminator. He's like grab some bug spray and kill some bugs in his office or this basement that they put him in. And then he noticed that he didn't get a check because back when he was getting interviewed by the Bobs, they, as they said, fixed the glitch with him where he wasn't an active member of the Initech team. There's actually a deleted scene where one of the Bobs visits him at his desk and is like, "Hey, I'm looking through the employee records and I'm not seeing you active on here. Are you still getting checks?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm getting checks, but I worked overtime last week and didn't get compensation for those extra hours." So that's kind of because he's probably getting paid a base like salary or a base like 40-hour week times whatever you're getting paid. So each week he's getting paid the same amount of money. Except he noticed it when he worked the overtime that it wasn't on the check. This scene is deleted, so I don't think it really fits into the film. But then they talked to Lumbergh about it, saying like he was fired, like however long ago. However, there's some glitch in payroll where he's still getting a check, so he still thinks he has a job, and nobody had the heart to really tell him that he was fired. So then, eventually, they fix that, and one of the closer to the end of the film, he goes to talk to Lumbergh about. He's like, "Hey, I didn't receive a check because the Bobs took care of the glitch. They actually like made it so he wouldn't be receiving checks anymore." And goes and says like, "Hey, I'm not getting my checks." And they're like, "Well, just wait for Lumbergh to show up, and he'll talk to him when he gets there." He opens the door to Lumbergh's office, which I'm surprised it wasn't actually locked. I don't know if they just offices don't get locked, or maybe Lumbergh was already in the building and had left it unlocked. But he goes in there, discovers the envelope as we come to see, and when Peter drives up to basically turn himself into Lumbergh, he notices that the entire building is on fire because Milton had like threatened to burn the building down at least to himself several times. So the building burns down. Basically, all the evidence burns down. Milton takes the money, goes to like Mexico or something like that. Is on a resort complaining about the margarita not having enough salt or any salt or whatever it was. And then Peter starts over with a job that he seems to like more. He's working with his friend Lawrence. He's outside getting sun and all that, getting exercise. And then Samir and Michael show up. They're working at Initro now. They say, "Hey, we can get you a job." Peter's like, "No, I'm good." But that's where the movie ends. I think there was a deleted scene where actually Lumbergh was killed in the fire, and it's like there's a scene where I think somebody mentions like, "Hey, you going to Lumbergh's funeral?" And they're just like, "No, we're not going to that." That scene was cut. There's a few other scenes where I think what scenes were cut on there. There's a scene where Peter tells Nina from accounts payable to like he's like, "Hey, can you answer the phone a little bit differently, at least once or twice?" Because she kind of just like it's like corporate accounts Nina like how can I like please hold? It's like basically the exact same tone, the exact same delivery, the exact same like words used over and over. And there's a scene where she's just repeating that like ad nauseum, and Peter hasn't even been clocked in for like a few minutes yet, and he's getting that, he's hearing it from her. So he goes and tells her to basically like, "Hey, can you change it up just a little bit?" There's a few other deleted scenes that don't really add a whole lot to the story or anything. You can easily see why they were cut. There's a scene where they're all at Tchotchke's again, like having like beers and whatnot, but that's about it. So, Office Space, still a really fun movie. I still really enjoy it. It's like I said, I played it when I'd be working at another job, and just the audio and the dialogue of it. The dialogue is probably like the writing is probably I think its strongest suit, and then the of course the scenes where Peter is tearing his office apart with "Damn, it feels good to be a gangster" playing, as well as the printer scene, really make some of those scenes iconic. But the writing is really good. It's really funny. If you've ever had a job that you don't like, you can kind of probably even relate to some of these characters, even if your job is not in an office. Like I said, I worked in an office for maybe like 3 months. It was like a summer job. It was maybe even less than that. So I can relate to some of the office stuff, but a lot of the stuff I can just relate to, bosses making weird demands of their employees, basically like asking them to like work extra days when they don't really like, kind of like out of the blue, things like that. So really fun movie still. I think it still somewhat holds up with the exception of the kind of outdated technology and the fact that they were working on bank software for the year 2000 switchover. Those are the only two things that kind of date it to me. Other than that, I still really enjoy the movie. It's still a lot of fun. Um, I may pick it up on Blu-ray because I did have issues trying to get this DVD to start. I actually did get it playing. I think it might be scratched, so I might pick up the Blu-ray. I still think I still have the conversion I did of this to like an iPod format, which is just terrible resolution. It wasn't even an iPod; it was a Creative Zen Vision M player. I eventually put that on my iPod. Originally put it on like a tablet as well, but still a lot of fun. If you haven't seen it, I would recommend renting it, picking it up, watching it on Amazon or any of the other places where you can rent it. I don't know if it's streaming anywhere. I didn't really look because I had the DVD, but it might be available streaming as well. And again, that's Office Space. I actually have the scripts, like two scripts to Office Space somewhere that are, I think, signed by a few different cast members. But those are just like kind of like the script writer to The Room, which I have, got signed by Tommy Wiseau when he was here. But I have a couple like basically just printouts of the Office Space script. And I have a Bill Lumberg bobblehead somewhere, and of course the Initech shirt in this nice red stapler. But that's gonna do it for this video. Remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. The next movie we're gonna be watching is let's see, is The Matrix. Got the notes ready for it to go right there. I just saw this movie recently in the theaters back maybe like a month ago when it was in its re-release for its 20th anniversary. I am still going to watch the DVD of it as well, so I'm going to watch it. I'll watch it twice this year. Just a little kind of spoiler for the Matrix episode is the movie still holds up. The movie still is really really good. I saw it when it came back out in Dolby. It was like Dolby Cinema, and the sound and the picture quality were just still awesome. The story still holds up. The visual effects are still really cool looking too. So that's just a little preview of the next episode we're going to be doing for The Matrix. And again, that's it for this episode. Remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. We'll see you next time. Take care.